Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 5, Episode 35. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. The Trump administration wants to present itself as a law and order administration. Some of you may agree that the actions taken have been warranted. Some of you may disagree that the actions taken have been overzealous. It is difficult for me to accept that this is a law and order administration when you've got a pedo who comes over from a foreign country, gets caught in a pederast sting in Las Vegas, and subsequently leaves this country under the nose of the FBI, escaping these charges. And Jerry Jones, GM and owner of the Dallas Cowboys. He is a smart businessman. He is an excellent oilman, and he is a terrible fucking negotiator. Thank you all for those who've been here for the long haul. I appreciate it. If you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. Yes, This Is Why I Don't Vote is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1, a law and order administration.
I don't think it's a mystery that the Trump administration wants to come out as a law and order administration. These protests are going on in L.A. Trump calls out the National Guard in L.A. There's a truancy issue in Washington, D.C. I wasn't aware of this as a national story. I know a few people that live in D.C., and I just didn't think to reach out to them. But there's a truancy issue. It's a thing in D.C. Middle school kids and high school kids don't go to school. And apparently there aren't many repercussions from a law enforcement standpoint. These kids are just now roaming around during the course of the day, many of them getting up to no good. I'm not going to call them gang members or criminals, but if you're a teenager and you don't want to go to school and you don't go to school and you're clowning around with your friends all day, you're generally going to get into some fuckery. From the people that I spoke to, the perception is that this lawlessness, it has to stop. I'm not making a comment on whether or not there is a crime problem in D.C. The point being, it's a great pretext to calling in the National Guard, and that's what Trump does. You've got this Abrego Garcia case where they deport this guy to El Salvador. They have to bring him back. Now they want to deport him to somewhere, I think, in Africa. The Trump administration is still harping on this guy being a human trafficker, a gang member. All of this in service of the perception that the Trump administration is a law and order administration. But a story broke about a week ago, and it does not support this whole tough guy, law and order type look that Trump wants to purvey. Las Vegas authorities, in conjunction with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, sets up a sting to lure child predators into believing that they are talking to minors who they will then go meet to have sex. This particular sting nets, I believe, a total of 8 people. There are 8 arrests made. Now, these are people who are presenting to a place thinking that they're meeting a minor in order to have sexual intercourse. They are immediately arrested. One of these people who was arrested is an Israeli official. His name is Tom Alexandrovich. He is a senior Israeli cybersecurity official, and I believe that title alone downplays who he is. He's basically one of the top people, if not the top person, in Israeli cyber defense. I believe he reports directly to Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel. This guy gets caught in this pedo sting, and from what I understand, admits to who he is. He doesn't try to use an alias. He doesn't try to say, you've got the wrong guy. He basically says, hey, this is who I am. I have a flight to catch in a couple of days. I need to make a phone call. Evidently, a phone call is made. This guy gets on the flight, and he goes back to Israel. Let's recap. This is a law and order administration, and this law and order administration is not taking any shit from any protesters in Los Angeles, from any truants in Washington, D.C., from any alleged gang members. If you want to protest and you're not willing to abide by a curfew, National Guard. If you're a 16-year-old boy and you're supposed to be in school and you're not, National Guard. If you're an illegal and they pin the tail on that donkey, they tell you that you're a drug smuggler or you're a human trafficker, the big beautiful bill made ICE, Immigrations and Custom Enforcement, a paramilitary agency for all intents and purposes. It's got a budget, I think it's bigger than the U.S. Marine Corps. They're going to deport your ass somewhere. If you're visiting the country and you want to fuck a 14-year-old, you get to go back home. There is no way, under any set of circumstances, that any American or anyone that's not a foreign dignitary, particularly of the state of Israel, could get caught up in a pedophile ring, be so brazen as to tell the authorities that they have a flight to catch. They've got to go back home, home being a foreign country, and then have the authorities release them so they can take that flight. Now, I figured that Israel, being one of our closest allies, and that's what we've heard over the course of the last 15, 20 years, this is one of our closest allies, period. But it just happens to be our closest ally in the Middle East, a country that's mirrored after our own, the only real democracy in that region of the world. And it turns out that we have one of the most toothless extradition treaties one could have with another country. For the ignorant, and I mean that in the most innocent way, for the ignorant, any Jewish person that wants to go to Israel, even though they may not be an Israeli citizen, they're a full-fledged American citizen. If they're Jewish, they can go to Israel and they will be accepted and they will be granted dual citizenship. The Israeli government will grant them Israeli citizenship and they can stay in Israel, and yet they'll also have their citizenship rights in the United States. Well, as it turns out, there have been many criminals over the course of the years, pedophilia being one of the crimes that some of them have committed, but you name the felony and they've got somebody in that category. Americans that realized that they were in a lot of trouble and they would flee to Israel, ask for this asylum, and that's what I'm going to call it. It's not called asylum, but these are people who are running from the American government because they've committed a crime in the United States to Israel, and they are granted Israeli citizenship. And evidently, it's extremely difficult for the U.S. government to get them back. Just like you, dear listener, I was completely unaware of this. I was ignorant to this fact. If your main source of news is the mainstream media, this story has been surprisingly absent from the 24, the 48, the 72-hour news cycle. Let's call it what it is. This is an immigrant who's coming over to the United States and attempting to have sex with a minor, getting caught by not only local authorities, the Las Vegas authorities, but it's in conjunction with the FBI. So this is a federal crime. Being able to turn around, get on a flight, and fly back home and not have to come back to the United States to face these charges. Someone had to sign off on that. Someone had to sign off on that within the federal government. You may love Trump. You may hate Trump. The man does know how to play politics. And one of the things that you can do in playing politics is you make a promise, you take action, and no matter how that promise matches up with the action you take, you give it the result that you want. Robert McNamara said it best when he was talking about having to answer reporters' questions about Vietnam when he was Secretary of Defense. You don't answer the question that was asked. You provide the answer to the question that you wanted to have asked. You create a narrative in your answer regardless of how well it actually comports to the question that's being asked, one, and the facts, two. So let's look at an example of that in the Trump administration. These LA protesters are a bunch of rioters. Now, you could see the video of what went on in LA. There were some unruly protests, and there were some peaceful protests. But you just call them rioters, and no matter what anybody says to you, even if there's video evidence to the contrary, you call them rioters. You have this truancy problem in D.C., and I'm not saying that it doesn't create a perception of lawlessness that is then matched in crime statistics. My understanding is that the murder rate in D.C. is actually going down, but what are called quality of life crimes, such as petty burglary, assault, carjackings, These things are up. So you say crime is out of control and you send in the National Guard. My favorite example, though, is this Albrego Garcia case where there's no credible evidence that this man is a gang member or a human trafficker. And you think about it like this. If he really was as dangerous as the Trump administration is claiming, then they would keep him and they would put him in prison. I've said this before. They're not going to deport somebody that they think is that dangerous. Trump said that he was going to round up illegal immigrants that are committing crimes and he's going to deport them. So basically, anybody that you grab, you're going to place that moniker of criminal over their head no matter what they've done. Trump didn't invent this, but damn it if he's not a master of it. Politicians have been doing this since the beginning of time. You place a label on whatever you want, and no matter what the facts say, you just keep on reinforcing that label. This law and order veneer, though, is completely shattered when you've got a pedo immigrant come into your country and get caught in a felony sting operation, and then you turn around with knowledge and let his ass go home. You think about how much money the federal government has spent in calling out the National Guard in Los Angeles. You think about how much money the federal government has spent in calling out the National Guard in Washington, D.C. You know how much money the federal government is going to spend in supplementing ICE's budget and increasing the size of that police force in all of the powers that it's being given. And dear listener, if you agree with all of those actions, I'm not going to argue with you. What I will argue with you is that it's nothing more than a smokescreen if at the end of the day, you're going to do all of that. You're going to take all of those drastic actions. And because of who this person is or who they are affiliated with, you're going to turn around and let an immigrant pedophile leave the jurisdiction of the United States after getting caught in a felony sting and go back to their country. This Alexandrovich was supposed to be in a Las Vegas court today, August the 28th, the year of our Lord 2025. His attorney, who is one of the most powerful attorneys in Nevada, told the judge in the case, I told my client he didn't have to come back to the United States. And the judge was like, what are you talking about? This is a felony. Even though the guy was let off on bond, side note for all those people who wanted bond reform, this is what it looks like. A felony charge for trying to have sex with a minor and you're able to get off on bond and leave the state and the country. This guy's attorney's like, hey, I told him he didn't have to come. The judge is like, yeah, he is going to have to come. And I think they compromised and said that the next appearance, this guy could appear virtually. He's not coming back to the United States. So you're willing to spend all of this money in Los Angeles with the National Guard, in Washington, D.C. with the National Guard, on ICE, on the Justice Department, who's still dealing with this Albrego Garcia case, the foreign national pedo, the immigrant. We're going to try to brush that under the rug. So much for the Law and Order Administration.
Act 2. Jerry Jones and the Art of Negotiating.
There is a documentary series on Netflix about the Dallas Cowboys. It's centered on those great teams that they had in the early 90s. But it also then has to tell the story of Jerry Jones, his acquisition of that football team, and him bringing in Jimmy Johnson to create those powerful Cowboy teams. I haven't seen the entire series yet, but I've seen the first 2 episodes, and the documentary is really good. It does a great job of allowing Jerry Jones to be Jerry Jones. He's telling his story about how he made enough money to actually acquire the Cowboys. Jerry Jones has always been a gambler, and I believe the name of the series is The Dallas Cowboys and the Gambler. Maybe it's America's Team, the Gambler and his Cowboys. It's some kind of play on the fact that Jerry Jones is a gambler and that the Cowboys have always been known since the 1960s as America's Team. Jerry Jones was an oil man. He made a lot of money in oil. How did he do that? In his own words, he would take anybody's dollar that he could get to go and drill oil to speculate where there would be a productive well. By his own account, in the mid-1980s, he was roughly $50 million in 1980s dollars. In 1980s dollars. Should I repeat it again? In 1980s dollars, the man was, by his own account, $50 million in debt. He had all of this money that he had borrowed. He had put it out into a bunch of wells that weren't producing. He finally hit on one well, and that well made him close to $100 million. That's a gamble. Borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. The man is clearly a talker. He's clearly a salesman, that he could continue to convince people to give him money while he was so in debt to drill the next well, to drill the next well, to drill the next well. Soon after that well hit, the Dallas Cowboys came up for sale. And the reason why they came up for sale, it's not really well explained in the documentary. The documentary says that there was a recession and that many banks were being foreclosed on, many banks were going under. What really happened was the savings and loan debacle, where the United States government allowed, instead of you going and depositing your money in a bank that followed federal government lending guidelines, deposit guidelines, and was also insured by the FDIC, you could instead deposit your money and even invest in shares of savings and loans. These are basically private banks. They don't have to follow the federal guidelines with regard to lending, with regard to deposits, and they don't have any insurance for the money that you give them. The run on savings and loans, when that institution crashed, also caused a recession in the housing market, and it naturally caused a run on normal banks. People who were watching these savings and loans go under were insecure. They didn't truly understand how the FDIC worked, and they said, I'm getting my money out of the banking system altogether. The owner of the Cowboys, Bright was his last name, he made all his money in banking, and he was the president of a bank. He had his own bank, and he was losing his ass, and it turned out you didn't need to just have a savings and loan to make risky loans and do stupid shit. He was doing that anyway, and the federal government just hadn't caught him yet. So he had to sell the Cowboys. He had to liquidate that asset to save his ass from all his other debts. Jerry Jones gambled again. The man basically had to pay off all of his debts from the wells that weren't producing, and he took whatever money he could garner out of that one producing well, borrowed the rest. The man is a gambler, and he is a talker. He is a salesman, and he was able to buy the Dallas Cowboys. He was not flush with cash, and he could come in like you see in some of these deals today where these guys are billionaires and they're just throwing their money around. Jerry Jones gambled on buying the Dallas Cowboys. The man further gambled on firing the only coach that the Cowboys had known, Tom Landry, their GM of 29 years, Tex whatever his name was, hiring Jimmy Johnson, his friend and a college coach, and then trading Herschel Walker. If you lived through these times, you will recall everyone thought Jerry Jones was a fucking idiot. Lo and behold, Jimmy Johnson knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what kind of athletes he wanted to get on that football team. He knew exactly how he wanted them to play. All of the pieces fell into place. That cemented not only Jimmy Johnson's legacy, but Jerry Jones' legacy. He was part of one of the greatest football dynasties in the history of the NFL. Notice, I did not say in any of that Jerry Jones was a master negotiator. Jerry Jones is not a master negotiator. Jerry Jones is like many successful business people. They are willing to take risks. They are willing to stake not only all of their money, but their reputation on those risks. And then what can they do? What is the most necessary part of that? Any one of us can go out and say, I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to put up all my money. But then are you able to convince anybody else that that is worth doing themselves? Tie your horse to my wagon. I'm going to go and do this. You should follow my lead. It's one thing to take all these risks on your own and to gamble all of your own money, but when you are a good enough salesman that even in the middle of that, you can sell people on your vision, on your idea, and they buy, that is unique. Jerry Jones is unique that way. But is he a master negotiator? Fuck no. Fuck no. Let's talk about the Micah Parsons trade to the Green Bay Packers. Cowboys fans are having some revisionist history in order to cope with losing maybe the best defensive player in the NFC, a top 5 defensive player in the entire league. That cope is over the fact that after having been traded to the Green Bay Packers, Micah Parsons signed a $47 million a year deal. A year. He's the highest paid non-quarterback in the National Football League, and he signed that deal for multiple years. I believe the value of the contract is $188 million. To be clear, Jerry Jones is very much like Mike Brown of Cincinnati, and he's very much like his buddy, one of his best friends in the league ever, Dan Snyder, former owner of the Washington Commanders, the Washington Piglets, the Washington Redskins, whatever the hell you want to call them. These owners did not understand fundamentally how the NFL market works, and Jerry Jones has been burned by this numerous times with numerous players. It is a finite market. There are only 32 teams, so there are only 32 other employers in this finite marketplace. That gives you leverage over a player at certain points in a player's career, at certain points in a player's contract. One of the places that you do not have any leverage if you are an NFL owner or an NFL GM is when a player's contract is about to expire and it's a great player and you want to keep that player. Your leverage goes to practically zero, and that's why NFL teams, in order to protect themselves, and really this has happened in other sports. I believe the NBA made rules because you had so many stupid owners in the NBA that you had to make rules so they could not subvert not only their own team, but the entire league. Many of the rules that are negotiated between the NFL owners and the Players Association are because you have such stupid owners in the NFL like Jerry Jones that they have to make rules around how teams can keep their players, like giving teams the option to designate a player so that that player can't leave. If a player's contract is expiring, you can designate that player under this moniker. You can only do it for one player, but you can basically make them an offer that they can't refuse. They have to play under this offer. You are designating this player a franchise player, and you're paying them an aggregate, or I think it's an average of the top 5 players in that market, and you can keep them on the team. It's a very fucking stupid way for you to manage your roster, but sometimes teams have to do it because of the salary cap problems that they're facing. Or let me think of another example of when teams have to do it. Oh, it's when the team is so fucking stupid in its negotiations that they wait until the last minute when the contract for this player is expiring and they have no leverage and they have no other option on their team that could step into the same role, and they don't know whether or not there's going to be a free agent on the market comparable to the player they already have, and they have to designate this player with what they call the franchise tag. Dan Snyder famously did this for 3 seasons in a row with one Kirk Cousins. That's right, Kirk Cousins, not to be confused with Kurt Cousins. It's because Washington didn't know whether or not they wanted to lock this guy up to a long-term contract, but they had nobody else. They could have gotten Kirk Cousins on a much better deal had they signed him to a 3 or 4 year deal. Instead, they had to go on these 1 year deals where they had no leverage whatsoever. They were probably paying him more than what they could have paid him under a 3 or 4 year structured contract, and they had no security with the player. If Jerry Jones had approached Micah Parsons before the beginning of last season and offered him a $35, $36, $37 million contract, he would have signed it. He would have signed a 4 or 5 year extension for $35, $36 million. There's no doubt in my mind. In fact, that was the number that was floated. All the social media rumors, all the internet rumors, that was the number that was being floated. And when you hear a number like that, and you see it's being floated within these NFL league circles, it's because the players' camp is throwing it out there. This is the number or the range that we're going to sign that extension in. And the Cowboys didn't offer it to him. In fact, the Cowboys didn't offer him shit. They said, we're not negotiating right now. And who said that? Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones waited until he had no real leverage in the negotiations. Sadly, because now there's no Dan Snyder in the league, the only other buffoon that we have that does this is Mike Brown, and he's doing it with Trey Hutchinson. Hutchinson has 1 year left on his deal, and they're offering him $10 million below market. They're either going to end up trading him for pennies on the dollar or potentially even losing him outright and not getting any compensation for it. Now, to his credit, Jerry Jones did get compensation in return for the Micah Parsons trade. And I know he felt like he had made a reasonable offer, probably more than reasonable offer to Parsons. I think he said he ended up offering him $40 million a year. But the problem was that after all those other defensive players had signed their contracts, Parsons saying, I'm at least as good or better than any of them, Jerry Jones had let the market outpace what he was willing to pay at the time, and then $40 million wasn't going to cut it. If Micah Parsons thinks he's a top 3 defensive player in the National Football League, and you see a bunch of other guys signing for $38, $39 million, you're not going to allow yourself to settle for less than what the market can bear. Did the Packers overpay? Probably. But look, the Packers were in this position thinking this is manna from heaven. They send 2 late first-round picks to the Dallas Cowboys, and they're getting a bona fide top 5 defender in the National Football League. You don't know what you're going to get in any first-round draft pick, even if you draft well, which the Cowboys do not. So the Cowboys, yes, it looks like on paper they got some return, but they did what bad negotiators do. They backed themselves in a corner. They had leverage at different points in the negotiation. They didn't exercise that leverage properly. They waited too long to come to an agreement on terms with someone that they wanted to stay, and then they lost all their leverage. I watched a video. Jerry Jones is notorious for doing this. Players that he wants to keep, that he waits too long to sign, thinking that somehow the leverage is going to shift into his favor by prolonging the negotiation of a new contract extension, and it just doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. That's why you've seen a lot of talent leave the Cowboys. There's no doubt that Jerry Jones is a master business person, that he is a gambler. He's willing to gamble on himself. He's willing to take his money and gamble on himself, and he can convince practically anyone to join along in that gamble. But when it comes to negotiating, no. This is just another testament to the fact that those Cowboy teams that were built in the 1990s were primarily the brainchild of Jimmy Johnson. And as smart as he is in business, Jerry Jones is just a bad general manager of an NFL team. And given that he's the owner, he's a pretty bad owner. Consider this, dear listener. If the steward of the Dallas Cowboys over the course of the last 20 years was some random third party and you saw the results of that random third party, do you think the owner, Jerry Jones, would allow that person to keep their job? The limited appearances in the playoffs, the limited success in those limited appearances in the playoffs. Just another nail in Jerry's GM coffin. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.